screen. Okay, can you all see that screen? Great, thank you, thanks.
All right.
Go ahead, Shawn, thanks.
So as we begin, okay, so once again, my name is Shawn Reed Jr. I am the Manager of Strategic Initiatives here at the Central New York Community Foundation. I'm partnered today with my Vice President of Community Investment, Frank Ritzy, and our Communications Representative, Dara Harper. So we're putting on an informational session for you today, explaining performance management learning community. And what exactly is performance management? So for us as an organization, we are big on numbers, data, and how we can use this to help with our community impact. So why are we interested in performance management? So as far as like for a good example, as far as if you are an organization that supplies food for a certain community, how is that being utilized? How many people are you serving? Are the funds you're being awarded, are those being used wisely? That is all tracked by data. We teach you in our performance management class how to take those numbers we teach you how to take those numbers and break them down and find out the best way to study them. And then with that, you can use that for a better way of applying for grants. Any questions on that part of it? Okay, all right. So once again, if you do have any emergent questions, feel free to use one of the reactions. You can even raise your hand. I can see a majority of you. Okay. All righty. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our VP, Frank Ritzy, and he's going to be discussing what does the learning community entail.
All right, thank you, Shawn. So that's our agenda for today. You know, what is the community? We'll talk a little bit briefly about what John talks about, the Community Foundation's interest in performance management, and I'll get into what the learning community is all about. So I'll go ahead and jump into this. So here you have an image of performance management. You know, what does that mean? Really, there's two parts. One is measuring performance, right? Just tracking how well your organization is doing. And there are so many reasons that this can be helpful. It can help you in terms of deciding where to put your efforts. It can help you with knowing whether or not a new program that you launched has worked. So measuring that performance is really critical. And the second part is the management, taking action with respect to it. So when you put those together, you really have this cycle that is probably very, very familiar to many of us. You start with planning. You know, what is it that we want to change in our community? And with that, there's often some need for data. You want to know the extent to which an issue actually is an issue. If you're looking at, for instance, something relevant to today, how many people are without food of our clients due to COVID? Actually quantifying that and figuring out what percentage of our caseload is in need of food. That's that first part. You know, we want to change that if there's a large number that are in need of food. Then moving on to executing, you know, what activities can we take in order to address that? And that is something that many of you as organizations, you know, we do this with every day, but we often don't necessarily tie it to data. What you do in the performance management learning community is for each of these steps, you tie these to data so that you're making decisions based on constant and continuous collection of data. And what we try to do is make it so that that's not onerous. So it actually makes your life easier. Once you execute those activities, there's the step of, you know, tracking what's happening now, monitoring progress as it occurs, and then looking to see, analyzing, you know, what happened as a result. You know, are people better off? Do your clients now no longer have that need for food, et cetera? And then you adapt. How can you build on that program and make it better? So this is probably something that many of us, as I said, are already familiar with. What we try to do is find ways to make it easier for organizations to connect data with this and really be driving their decision-making with data. So one of the key components to this is understanding the difference between outputs and outcomes. And so for that, we have a brief video that we're going to share here that really kind of helps to elucidate the difference between those. So I'm going to share this short video right now. Can you see the video screen? Has it shifted for you?
No.
No? All right, so I'm going to stop the sharing and then reshare with the video. How about now? Can you see it now? There's a little hostile here. Okay, so
Yes.
if there's any problems, let me know. Just wave your hand or something. So we'll just watch this brief video. And the key learning point here is that, you know, many organizations such as this collaboration are pushing toward outcomes. And we realize that it is important for organizations to be able to do this. The origins of the learning community really came in 2009 when the federal government made available a wide variety of resources, and they were going to help communities scale up organizations that had proven impact. And what happened was we pulled together a bunch of nonprofit partners and a bunch of funding partners, and we were all ready to go ahead and fund those organizations to scale up programs with proven impact. But when we saw what the federal government was requiring, almost immediately the other funders, and these were funders across upstate New York, so not just Syracuse, and nonprofit partners realized, you know, we actually can't demonstrate impact. We actually don't have the skills or the sophistication to prove our impact. And so that was really where the Central New York Community Foundation became interested in the area of performance management. We really do offer this learning community as a service to organizations because we realize how important it is in that funding competition realm for organizations to be able to demonstrate their impact and to you know, then successfully compete for funding, especially when competing you know, across the state or across the nation. So we wanted to show this video because it makes the important distinction between outputs and outcomes. And that is critical to measuring performance. Really, what this learning community is about is helping you focus not on those outputs, the number of people served or the number of sessions run, but really the changes in people's lives as a result. And so that's what we're really focused on in this learning community. So I'll go ahead and show this video, which will hopefully make that distinction.
Nonprofits, governments, funders, and financiers of social services are often driven by a common goal: to help people and strengthen communities. Yet, is the current funding system hindering progress towards that goal? Take, for example, Jack. Jack has no job or permanent place to live, largely because of his struggles with severe clinical depression. So most days, Jack's best hope is a shelter called the Output Center. The Output Center takes him in, but they have no funding to get him treatment. In fact, he's been staying with them on and off for the past 3 years and not getting any better. The Output Center's funding is based solely on providing a safe and clean nightly shelter. While they're very good at what they do, this funding model means they can't focus their resources on treating the underlying causes of homelessness, like Jack's illness. Like so many organizations, they are funded based on outputs. Outputs are the measure of an organization's activities. For the center, that means the number of clients housed each night. This outputs-based funding model comes with conditions that make it hard for the shelter to focus on addressing underlying issues like clinical depression. Because of this model, Jack doesn't receive the treatment that would help him in the longer term, and so the cycle of homelessness continues. Now, let's look at a different approach. One day, Jack goes to a different shelter called the Outcome Center. Here, a staffer points him to Maya, a counselor who can begin treating Jack's illness. The Outcome Center has funding to invest in professionals, such as Maya, that help Jack, and others like him, overcome the very problem that brought him to the shelter in the first place. The center's belief is that with treatment of this sort, Jack will get and keep permanent housing. The difference here is a focus on outcomes rather than outputs. Outcomes are the tangible results that a shelter achieves and can measure, such as the number of clients they transition into permanent housing, who stay there for at least a year. The Outcome Center's outcomes-based funding allows them to address Jack's illness and put him on a sustainable path to recovery. This concept changes the way we think about funding and success. It reorients the funder-grantee relationship around long-term results. Nonprofits get the space to innovate, to tackle social problems. And most importantly, Jack has the support he needs to live a healthier life. To solve big problems, we need long-term solutions. An outcomes approach lets schools focus not just on how many students are in their classrooms, but on getting their students to graduate. It lets hospitals focus not just on how many patients they see and how often, but on whether or not those patients get healthy. We all want to get the most out of social sector spending, so it's up to all of us to deliver better outcomes for Jack and all communities by rewarding providers for the long-term value they create. Visit investinresults.org to join the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. Actually, let me just turn that off so it doesn't keep playing in the background. Oh, looks like it's off. So we shared that that video, and hopefully many of you are already familiar with this concept, the outcomes versus outputs. But we wanted to share that video just for clarity because we'll be referring to the term outcomes throughout. And this actually tends to be one of the biggest challenges for many organizations, not all, is sort of just determining, what are my outputs, which are the, these number of people that we serve or the services provided versus how their lives are actually changed. And it turns out that measuring people's life changes and how they're better off can get a lot more complex. And that's really where the heart of the learning community is, focusing on helping organizations to measure that. So as we move on, really, we wanted to just kind of get into what the learning community entails. It's really intended to help strengthen local organizations' ability to gather and utilize data for planning, adapting, and improving programs and services. The learning community meetings include hands-on data analysis, that's data collection, pivot table analysis using Excel and other tools, presentations on your work on the assignments, and basically there are a series of hands-on data labs where you actually learn how to use those tools and build your skills in that area, and then present on your status as you go. But you also are applying that to your organization, right? And trying to use those tools in your organization. And so that's what a lot of the presentation is. How have you applied that? And then opportunities for shared learning. We don't see ourselves as experts, but really facilitators of a ongoing learning community where in that setting, everyone has something to share. And so whether it's something that you learned somewhere else and that you'd love to share with the group, or you think it would be useful, or something that you learned in the process of applying these tools to your organization. The expectations to complete community needs assessment with clients is another thing, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But what we actually do to help everyone be on the same page and to start sharing using the same language is we all engage in a process collecting the same data from our organizations and then analyzing it for our own organizations. And it really helps to facilitate the learning process together. So as I shift to the next slide, I want to point out that that what I'm describing is the traditional performance management learning community, and that's the blue one in the middle. And this year, we have recently launched 2 other complementary learning communities that, and you'll be able to sort of indicate which one you think is the best fit for your organization, but during the due diligence process, will also actually help you. So if you're not sure, you don't need to indicate that. But really, the first group is really a beginner's group, and that's the one here in Lilac, the PMLC prep group. That's intended for organizations that are in the beginning stages of using data management, and maybe you're not really ready to invest all of this time in learning how to use Microsoft Excel and to building your personal skills to actually do number crunching. What is expected of this group is you actually complete the life needs assessment, and that'll be consistent with all of the 3 learning communities, and I'll talk more about that in detail in a second. And then you attend about just 6 learning community sessions. And really those are just meetings, lunchtime meetings, if we're able to meet in person, where we share our progress and experience in using that tool for our organization. It's really meant for beginner or novice data managers, maybe even an executive director who really wants to be connected with data, but doesn't have time given all of the busy things on your schedule, or the many responsibilities you have, to really focus on learning a computer program or application like Microsoft Excel. And many people already know Microsoft Excel and use it for budgeting, but haven't quite used it for performance management. And so it can be quite a challenge. So this could be a good fit for them. Grant managers, program associates, newer staff. You really don't have to have a lot of computer experience or computer savvy to really use these tools. It's really as easy as clicking on web links and clicking arrows and drop down menus. And so, this would be good for organizations, that are interested in moving in this direction, but are not really yet ready to take it to the next level of crunching their own data. And grant amounts in this area are about $5,000. So the next level up is for organizations that are a bit more sophisticated, that have begun using data in some format to create reports, but haven't yet mastered the skills of producing charts, graphs, and doing their own analyses to drive decision making. And so maybe you have an organizational database. Maybe you've invested quite considerable resources and time and financial in terms of money and purchasing that and installing it. But you realize it doesn't quite do the reporting that you want, or you realize you get a grant, a new grant, and you don't want to invest the time and money in tweaking that system because it can take too long, and maybe you'll be done with that grant by the time you're able to do that. For these organizations, you'll often want to be able to crunch data your own way and have that flexibility. And that's really the heart of the performance management learning community. And this is the one that's really the one that we've been running for some time, since soon after 2009. This group will also complete the life needs assessment because it is such a helpful tool, but it's more learning sessions. It's 10 learning community sessions, and you also have a series of 10 labs that you could produce, and that's the hands-on. And we do that with the flipped classroom. You actually watch a video and follow along, and then we're there to help you during the time you're doing that. As you run into problems, we do that if we do it virtually or in person, depending on the situation with public health. But basically, you really are learning how to use those tools, and hopefully it's making you think of new ways that you can actually crunch numbers in real time and answer questions that help you make performance decisions as an organization. You also do midterm assessments and final reports on your project. So you're expected to actually apply these tools to your organization. So this is really for intermediate data managers. Maybe you're not a data science person, but you're a program person, but you're committed to really learning how to analyze the outcomes of your organization and make decisions on that. So program managers, or especially groups that have already participated in the PMLC prep would be good candidates for this. For this, the amount is up to $20,000, and because it is, we're really paying you for the time that you're investing in this increasing sophistication for your organization. It really does take quite a bit of time to learn those skills. The next group in the green, the PMLC Pro, is really intended for organizations that have mastered the skills listed in both Prep and Pro, but are interested in working with other organizations to collaborate and network on best ways to solve community needs. So here you really kick it up a notch and focus quite a bit more on data sharing and what do you do when you're able to then see data from other organizations. How do you take action? How do you actually move to being, focusing on the silo of your organization and your programming to doing that in connection with the programming done at other organizations so that you can be more complementary and do that in a data-driven way. So it is quite a bit more sophisticated. To do this, you do the life needs assessment, and you'll notice the life needs assessment is a key tool that really helps build the infrastructure for cross-data collaboration. And that is similar in a commitment to the PMLC prep in terms of 6 learning community sessions. And really what that group just does is develop a joint paper, white paper, so to speak, or policy paper that helps to inform the policy of the community, ways that the community could collaborate better based on what you found in the data that you collected and looked at collaboratively. This is really for proficient data managers, program officers, or directors, and previous learning community participants. So those who have completed the blue PMLC intermediate, and that is $5,000 typically. So you can do that multiple years. Intermediate, you can do up to 2 years, and PMLC prep, you can do multiple years as well as you're getting ready. So you can apply for these for repeat as long as you are continuing your growth, and we can talk about that during the due diligence. So any questions before we move on about these 3 levels, because there are these 3 levels and they are rather new?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Let's say you have an organization or some attendees that may feel like they want to come in under the first one, but we're really interested in everything that the second one has to offer. But just feeling green and unfamiliar with everything, that will be discussed, just kind of like wanting to start from the basic level. Is it possible to then take advantage of the second class, or what would you suggest?
That's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, and we don't expect you to know exactly which one is right for you. We'll do that during the due diligence. We'll have a conversation with you, and we'll look at what you're doing, and you can tell us about the hopes and dreams of your organization. This learning community has been developed over all of these years in response to organizations' hopes and dreams, what they say they'd like to be doing. That's how we created the content, and the content is always evolving. But in talking with you, we'll get a sense for which would be the best fit for next year. But it's absolutely possible to do PMLC prep 1 year and intermediate the next year and pro the year after, or to have that elongated where prep might take a couple years and intermediate takes a couple years, and then you get into pro. So it could be a long-term growth for your organization, and you could end up benefiting from all 3. Does that help to answer your question?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the grant money. What is that to be used for? The 5,000, 20,000, or whatever it is?
Great, that's a great question. And in this case, it's kind of unique compared to a typical grant. Although it is quite similar in some ways. If you were to say, for instance, get a grant to run an after-school program, that funding would be to actually have the staff to run that after-school programming. In this case, if you just switch out after-school programming with participating in the learning community and doing the requirements for that, it's money to have your staff go ahead and do that learning. So your staff aren't spending their time running the after-school program. Instead, they're in this learning environment and they're immersing themselves. We realize that takes time and takes resources. And so really, we're compensating the organization for the time you're investing and the staff you're investing in participating and doing those activities. Does that help to answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so we'll move on to the next slide. This might help you to think about this, and this is really preparation for when we meet with you during our due diligence to figure out which learning community is the best for you at this moment. Do you all see the slide with the train at the top left? Yep, okay, great. So this is the metaphor that we use to talk about the 2 approaches that we use throughout the learning community process. The learning community will cover 2 ways of doing data analysis. One is automated, and that, of course, is the easiest. It's the click of a button. And for that, we use the metaphor of a train. And the other way of doing data analysis is by hand. And when we say by hand, it's not paper and pencil. It's using Excel and doing pivot tables and crunching it. But you really are doing it yourself. You're doing your own analysis. And for that, we use the metaphor of a car. And so the automated part, the train metaphor, That's what the Life Needs Assessment Google tool that we'll talk about is. So all three learning communities do use this tool, but this is the real focus of the prep group. It's automated, it's easy, anyone can use it once it is built. So, it might take a lot of work to build a train. You have to put tracks down, you have to, build a network, you have to have a power source. But once you build it, it can be very easy. It's as easy as clicking on a link and reading a chart. And so, if you think of a train, you can easily send, a child, a minor on a train to go visit relatives or a friend. And so you really don't need to have a lot of skills, right, if you think about that. And so that's what the Life Needs Assessment tool does. And we want people to have exposure to that and to see how easy and how within reach, because the platform we use, Google Suites, is available either free or low cost. It could be as cheap as $12, $15 a month for an organization. And you can really do some amazing things with that. And so we want everyone to learn that how that tool works. But we realize that even when you build a train like that or infrastructure, and you'll see that in this infrastructure, we have 19 shared questions that everyone asks. So you see that on the RFP. But you also have the opportunity to add extra questions, an infinite number of extra questions if you like. And that infrastructure, you'll notice though, may not always get you exactly where you need to go as an organization. Just like a train won't exactly get you to your destination. So for instance, say you were going to, I don't know, Orlando, and you're gonna take the train there. The train will get you to the train depot, but once you're there, that's not quite where you wanted to vacation in the train depot, I imagine, right? You oftentimes will want to go someplace more specific, a resort, for instance. And once you realize that there are limitations to pre-made reports, you may have already noticed this with the data system that you've created, that it doesn't quite answer with a pre-canned report what you want to know. You realize that there is a need for learning how to do data analysis by hand. And that's where we use the car metaphor, right? Once you get to that train depot in Orlando, you then need to either rent a car and drive the rest of the way yourself, or get a taxi, right? Which is the equivalent of hiring someone else to do your data analysis. And what we do in the intermediate group is that's where we really focus on that hands-on. That's why we have all of these lab assignments, right? You go hands-on and you, because you need to learn the skills to do these things like charts, pivot tables, budgets. And they're important because the automated tools and data systems like trains have limitations. You don't always have pre-programmed queries that answer your ever-evolving questions, especially if you're in a learning environment, which is what performance management is all about. Your question this quarter will be different from your question next quarter because you'll have answered that question and moved on to the next one. So in other words, the train won't get you to the doorstep of your destination, as I shared. You'll need to know how to drive unless you want to hire a taxi. So that's what we focus on. So if you're ready to start, you're committed and you're ready to start learning those skills, to digging deep into perhaps some data that you're already collecting in your system, but answering new questions, that's where that intermediate level is really for you. And if you're already doing that and you really want to use other organizations to leverage the outcomes that you have, then the pro is really for you. For instance, you're a job training organization or a job training program, and you realize that so many of your clients have childcare needs and transportation needs, but you don't provide those services, and you want to leverage as efficiently as possible the services provided by other organizations and have those propel your clients to success. So when you're trying to get them job interviews, they already have their childcare and transportation lined up, for instance. That's what that pro is for, right? When you're really trying to coordinate your services with others to really maximize the outcomes of your organization. And so that hopefully this metaphor helps to give you a sense of the difference between these organizations. And whenever we introduce a metaphor like this, we just want to sort of pause and see if anyone has any clarification questions about that.
I would like to just chime in on as far as the metaphor that we're using. With our intermediate course, when you're making your selection of who the participants will be for that class, we encourage you to have at least 3 to 4 participants, but they need to have some type of technical background as far as using Excel. The class is pretty fast paced, and we don't really take too much time to teach how to use Excel. We're just expanding on the knowledge that you currently have. So when you make that selection of who will be participating, make sure you research your staff to make sure that they have that expertise as well.
Yeah. So to build on what Shawn's saying, what do we mean by expertise or experience with Excel? You don't actually have to ever have used it before, because we take it from, click on the icon, Microsoft Excel opens, and here's where it is. But you will have to do things, they're all done with you, such as, well, go open this spreadsheet. You can see how to do it. But if you're if you have staff that, this isn't a place where somebody who's really, you realize that, they're not that comfortable in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint and opening and closing documents and saving documents and remembering where they saved it. This isn't the place for them, right, to learn those basic skills, as Shawn's saying. If you can open and close documents, right, even if you've never actually used Excel before, we do take you from the beginning. And you can watch the videos as many times as you need to. Many people have never used the software ever before, and they might have to watch the video again and say, oh, because if you recall the first time you ever used email or PowerPoint or anything, getting the idea down that you need to, remember where you saved your file, open your file, that type of thing. Those type of skills, you really definitely want to have those skills before you enter PMLC intermediate. So any other questions? Okay, so I will continue on. Okay, so what to expect. So basically, this is what you would expect in the PMLC intermediate. The other ones, as I mentioned, are really going to be about helping you apply the life needs assessment. I'm going to get to that in one moment. But in that intermediate group, right, first you're going to start with sample data. You're going to go through a series of labs. They're going to help you do things like a needs assessment. What are the needs of your clients? You'll use some sample fake data at first, and this is what Shawn's mentioning, in Excel, to learn the techniques. Then in the process, you're going to be collecting the life needs assessment, just as you do in every learning community. And again, that's those 19 questions plus any questions that you are interested in asking of your clients. Then you're going to actually repeat those same labs you did in the beginning, but this time, instead of using fake data or sample data, you're going to be using data from your own organization. And that's where you really start to see that learning occur. And you develop a project evaluation model that aligns with your original application. What's an area of need that you think you want to explore for your organization? You'll do the needs assessment, and then we'll start talking about collaborative opportunities. So if you are doing the prep group, you're really not going to move beyond this. You're not going to do this first step, and you're not going to move beyond the second step. So you're really going to be focusing on the second step and what you can tell from that. If you're in the pro group, you're really going to focus on expanding, because you've already got all these skills. You're going to be expanding the skills that we focus on in the last step. And so here's where I wanted to talk a little bit about what exactly this life needs assessment is. So we've got a life needs assessment brochure. If we had a brochure for this, it might have a tagline along the lines of striving for performance, for the performance management easy button, and trying to make life easy. So what is it? Let's talk about this by the numbers. Really what the life needs assessment is one button, which is a web link. And that's a web link that you use to collect data. You could send it to your clients, or you can put it on paper and pencil and then go to this web link and add the data as you would an online survey. Then you have 4 buttons to access your results. 1 for doing needs assessment, 1 for doing program evaluation, a 3rd for collaborating and looking across organizations, and then a 4th related to collaboration, collaboration is for outreach to clients, to when you're starting to collaborate with another organization. How do you reach out to the specific clients on your caseload that would benefit from that collaboration? So I'm going to walk you through each of these steps quickly. So when I say button, really, this is a screenshot of, it would have your organization name here, it's basically a private website that you would pick, that you could put on your phone, your desktop computer, your iPad or tablet. And basically you'll see buttons for each of these functions and you click on your button. So hopefully you're getting the sense of what we mean by a train and the easy button. A lot of these things that can take up so much time and can be easy to think about conceptually, but really hard to implement when you get to the details. We try to make those things as easy as possible. And this is an ever-growing tool. Every year we come out with a new version as we learn from each learning community. But it really is a private website. And you can see the data entry pretest. If you were to click on that, what you'll see is a customizable, it's basically a web survey. You'll see that it asks questions like, what's your name for their client and their contact information, and then it goes into the 19 questions and then any other questions that you might have. You can use this as a pre-test, and you can use it as a post-test. It's very easy to do that. You can have a different link for each program you run. You could have a pre-test and a post-test for every program you run. You could have a pre-test and a post-test for every program you run, every time you run that program. So anything that you can do with paper and pencil evaluation, you can do with this. As I mentioned, this is all built in G Suite. And so this is a tool that you'll have access to after you're done with the learning community, and you can keep using. You can also have different questions for each program you run, and you can have as many surveys as you like. So these are all features. Some of these take a little more work than other, but what we do in the PMLC prep is we introduce you to this tool so you know what it's capable of, and you can start thinking about how you might want to use it. Then, just as an example, in terms of tools and what you can do with it, right? You have this function, for instance, when you start to look at needs. This is the first one. What are the current and changing needs of my organization? Can we look at a specific, you can look at a specific neighborhood or census tract. You can look at a group of organizations or other partners that you might want to partner with, and specific neighborhoods all at once. So it lets you start to look at each other's data across organizations. So you'll be able to see the data from other organizations, and they'll be able to see yours. Now, we'll get to confidentiality in a second, because we do this while protecting confidentiality and basically showing you how to protect confidentiality. That is critical. So you'll be able to do things like identify growing community needs. And it's different from a typical survey of the past, where you might look at census data or a survey done by an organization and say, wow, 50% of people need housing. Here, in this case, you'll actually be able to say, well, 20% of people need housing, and that's 172 people. And now I'm going to reach out. If I'm a housing organization, for instance, and I want to do something in this area or write a grant for this, I'm going to reach out to the exact organizations that have those 172 people, and I'm going to ask them to reach out to those specific people, because they know who they are, and connect them with my program. So when you start to plan programming, it really revolutionizes and makes it a lot easier, right? You could have done this on your own, all of those steps, but to get the buy-in and the collaboration and to do it, this is really meant to make that easier. So moving on to the next slide, it also makes it easier for you to monitor the outcomes of programs that you're running in real time. So for instance, if you're looking at some outcome, for instance, on some item, this happens to be housing, but it could be those other items. You could look at, pre and post all at once on your phone in real time. So you could actually see if it looks like you're on track to meet the outcomes that you've promised to your state or federal funder or whatever. And you can do this. You can both look to see if people are better off before and after, but because, as we mentioned, there's data sharing, you can look to see if people in your program are doing better than people in other organizations who are not participating in a housing program. So it helps you to do pre versus post, but also comparison, or as we often refer to as control group. It's not a randomly assigned control group, but it's a comparison group. So it does make key standard evaluation techniques much easier to do. Third, it helps you with digital matchmaking. And if you think in terms of these online dating apps where you swipe left and swipe right. Not sure exactly how that works, but one way is you're interested in learning more, and one way is you're not. There are new techniques that are still being built and some of them are already available, where you could perhaps browse. And if you think of this as kind of not interested, it's kind of like swiping to find both organizations and neighborhoods that are in key needs that you might want to focus on. So what needs do they have in which neighborhoods? Who could address needs that my clients have? that my programs don't, and whose clients can my program serve an unmet need for. So if you ever have trouble with recruitment, and we notice this quite often, an organization will say, oh, we're going to serve 200 people because we saw in the census that this is a big need. And then in a year, they realized we've only served 20. We couldn't find enough people. This is, when we talk about data matchmaking, this would be key for frontline staff and program managers in helping to reach out to find potential clients for their programming. We already know you spend a lot of time and effort designing great programs, to help minimize the effort it takes to recruit people for those programs. That might help you think about that. And then when you think about, well, if somebody reaches out to me and says, well, we're doing a housing program and we notice that you have about 20 people on your caseload now that say they have housing issues, we don't know who they are because of the confidentiality, because you didn't share that with us, but could you reach out to them? It should make outreach as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1, you pick housing, you click on this button, oh, I want people who said they don't have housing. 2 could be you pick neighborhoods if they're focusing on neighborhoods, and it picks the neighborhoods. And then 3, you just download the emails or the phone numbers of your clients that have this need, and you either send them a quick email or have somebody call them. Of course, you probably wouldn't just give this information to another organization because that would violate confidentiality, right? But you're able to very rapidly take action to connect your clients with each other's programs. And that's part of the infrastructure here. So this, when we say that it builds a train, this is what we're talking about. It try to make these things easy for organizations to do. And of course, trains have tracks, right? And so basically what all participants in any of these learning communities do is to assign this, is really an agreement. It's a life need. It really shares that the life needs assessment is a community project launched in Syracuse, New York, that includes multiple organizations asking the same questions and sharing their results with each other while protecting the confidentiality of their clients. The Central New York Community Foundation has helped these organizations with the technical aspects of sharing these data. We didn't start the survey. The surveys came from the collaborative group of the Literacy Coalition of Onondaga County, but we certainly help organizations to administer them and technically share these data, and each organization participates freely for as long as they desire. Basically, and this was coincides with the expectation of the learning community, is that organizations participating agree to collect at least 100 surveys annually and in return gain access to the entire life needs assessment data set. The data are intended to be used to do community needs assessment, organizational and program planning, program evaluation, assessment of community impact, matchmaking between organizations, recruitment of clients, and other activities designed to benefit the Central New York community. It's governed by a steering committee of community members who can grant exemptions on a case-by-case basis if any of this doesn't work for you, for instance. So basically, that's in a nutshell, what groups would sign on to, and you're really just agreeing that. And really, just to explain in common terms what data is sharing, basically you're sharing people's responses to the survey in an anonymized format so that people can tell who they are. So for example, what you're doing is you're basically saying the equivalent of, calling somebody on the phone and saying, hi, a client working with my organization that did the survey today is in need of childcare and transportation, and they live in Census Tract 17. Can I encourage them to reach out to you? That kind of thing. So from these data, we're able to take action, but it doesn't violate any confidentiality. You could put that on a billboard, and that's the level at which your data is actually being shared. It's a whole spreadsheet of that level of data. So, so that helps to sort of clarify that. We have some here the questions, and I think you already have that in the application materials. So I wanted to just pause and see if there are any questions before we get into the schedule of the PMLC, how it actually works in terms of, gatherings timeline-wise. Dee, do we have a question from you? I'm going to unmute you, or no, I think you have to unmute yourself.
We have one from Francesca.
Yes.
Question was whether it's are these sessions all done virtually now because of COVID? Are you going to have the learning sessions?
Yes, Dee, great question. So yes, we typically did them all in person, and you had some work to do, less work with the prep, of course, on your own. And certainly, we're prepared to transition online, virtual Zoom. And so right now, for instance, we have the groups going, and yeah, we're meeting via Zoom, and it's carrying on, and doesn't seem to be a problem. Of course, one of the hallmarks of the intermediate group is that we're there with you, typically in the computer lab as you run into problems. And so the adaptation now that we're planning is that we'll simply, it wasn't a problem this year because we were done with that portion by the time COVID hit. But we can simply be on an active Zoom while you're working there, and as you run into problems, ready to answer any questions. And also it allows you to share your screen, etc. So we can pinpoint exactly what the issues are. So Dee, does that answer your question?
Yes, and second question regarding the data sharing. Do you have a way of avoiding duplications? Say our client is a client of another organization. Is there a way to sort that out since we have address or is it a possibility that a person is in multiple different organizations as a data point?
So that is a great question, Dee. And there's a nice long backstory I can talk about from 10 years ago. But the answer is, it is absolutely possible. Yeah, and there are data systems and ways you could do that. And you could even configure this system to do that. But we do not do that here because for a few reasons. One is, well, that's not possible the way that we do it because nobody sees anyone else's addresses. So to do that, you have to have a trusted person who can see all the, contact information, names and stuff like that. Well, I mean, we do send the addresses to the US Census geocoder, but nobody sees the confidential information paired with any answers, right? So we couldn't remove any duplications. We certainly could do that. We could help if a few organizations want to do that. We could help you set it up that way, such as some other groups have done that, such as HOPE and the Alliance for Economic Inclusion, which are major programs in this community. So it's certainly possible with the technology, but for this learning community, we will not be doing that. And this also, when you do that, you really want to have people sign off on sharing their information with another organization. And so that's timely, that takes a lot of work, and we don't think that's necessary for people to learn these skills. So in this specific institution setup, you would not know if they're duplicate people until you started to get together and refer clients, and then you might start to get to the level of data sharing and that. Does that answer the question, Dee?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we have Francesca.
Yes, good morning. How many organizations do you anticipate participating in? Is it different at each level? And also, is it just Onondaga County or other areas as well in Central New York?
It can include Onondaga or Madison County. And we anticipate ideally maybe about 7 organizations in each. Prep 7, intermediate 7, pro 7.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next up, I believe we have Kat McCarthy.
Thank you. I also had the same geographic question, so thanks for answering that.
And do we have any other questions?
Okay, great. Then we'll move on and with the orientation. Okay, so I'll finish sharing my screen. So what does it look like? The prep and the pro are fairly easy. We schedule times that meet that work with people's schedules, and we have about 6 sessions meeting across the year. Hopefully 6 lunches, but if not, they'll be virtual. And those tend to happen, after December. So those groups will get going then. What has more of a schedule to it, though, is the PMLC intermediate group. And because that's quite a bit more intensive in terms of time. And so we wanted to get, talk about that, because the other ones are really just the time you spend in the meetings and then collecting data that help inform the meetings. So can you see this schedule here? I've lost my view. Can somebody just say yes?
Yes, Frank, you're good.
Thank you. So basically what happens for the PMLC intermediate is we start in January. So this group starts 4 consecutive Fridays, the whole month of January. And we have extensive sessions, 3.5-hour sessions, which include a bit of a lecture and workshop format. And during those time periods, you actually do labs. You do the labs. And so you're there, you're working on the computer as you run into technical issues. We're there roaming around to help you. And this is in response to Dee's question earlier, where we could do those virtually as well, but without the lunch. And so that really is an intensive amount of time. And what you have to do before that in order to be ready is watch and pay attention to about an hour-long video before each time. And that's a video of us walking through the steps so that it's fresh in your mind. And here's where it gets to the issue of, if you've never used Excel before, you probably want to watch the video twice beforehand, right? So you do these and you have homework that's done during the workshop, and you can finish it up afterwards if you don't have time. And those are due each week. Then once you've gone through these workshops, then it lightens up a bit. And from February to May, you continue to do those same labs, but you do them on your own data, right? Because you will have started collecting the life needs assessment in January on the first day. So you have a month worth of data already. And then we have 2-hour monthly check-ins for discussion and problem solving. And during that time period, and lunch, of course, if we're not virtual, you're really talking and sharing. And here's where it starts to shift from like a classroomy to a learning community more. You see that more so as you're sharing lessons learned with each other. And you're also presenting on certain topics that you volunteer for. And then in June, it pulls together for some more intensive work. And that is where we, again, do more intensive sessions, similar to January, and we start workshopping collaboration scenarios. And that really gets you prepped for PMLC Pro and data sharing. And you start to really workshop what would be helpful for your organization so that you know what to ask for of other organizations and how you could utilize what already exists and tweak what already exists for your organization's needs. And then in January, we have a final presentations where you present on the data that you collected from your life needs assessment, what needs you identified in your organization, what programming you implemented in order to respond to that. And it doesn't need to be a massive new program. It could be very simple. And then how you tracked to see whether or not those needs turned around and those needs were met. So the evaluation portion. So it's kind of straightforward if you've ever looked into evaluation in some sense, but we really try to focus on making the actual doing of these things easier as much as possible. So Shawn, do we have any questions?
It doesn't look like it, but is there, oh, we do have one. Pete, go ahead.
Earlier, Shawn, you had mentioned that it's like 3 to 4 participants. And so I'm wondering, we have 3 paid staff and they're part-time. We're a real small organization, Road to Emmaus Ministry of Syracuse. And we have one person who does a lot of the data. And I'm the grant writer. So I'm not sure if we could come up with 3 or 4 people.
I got you. We definitely encourage the 3 to 4, but in your situation, it's definitely understandable. We do have some organizations that are in the same situation. So if it was just one, we would accept that. The reason we encourage 3 to 4 is because if things come up in a person's lifestyle where they're not able to attend the class, plus with retaining the information, more heads are better than one, you know. So that's why we encourage it. But in your situation, I definitely understand.
Okay, thank you.
And that comes from experience, as Shawn's saying. You know, oftentimes if you've ever gone to a professional development conference and you return to the office and you have all these great ideas and people say, oh, well, yeah, that sounds great. Tell me about it later when we're not so busy. And it's hard to get the momentum going. But if, however, you're at a conference or professional development with other colleagues and you come back, you could say, you know what, that resonated. Did that resonate with you? And you can share in those terms. But I would say that is more important for the intermediate group and less important for the prep group. You know, the prep group, you know, it might fit really well, but you certainly, even as Shawn said, could do it with less people for the intermediate. Another thing is that we notice so many organizations, you know, it's a fact of life, have turnover. So an organization will go through the training and then within a year, they have, you know, quite a few people turnover, especially people who are eager to learn the skills at intermediate level. They become very marketable and often getting bigger and better jobs. And so that's also, it's really because we want the organization to retain that talent. But as Shawn mentioned, it's not a deal breaker.
And we've also had situations too where an organization might start off with, let's say, 3 people, and maybe one of those participants is not picking up on the information as they would like. You can change those participants out.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next section and just a check of time. All right, so we're at 11 o'clock, and so we're pretty much on schedule. So just a word about mentors, and this would be most applicable to groups that have already done the PMLC intermediate or the traditional one and want to return in a second year. We often will use those groups as mentors and we'll pair those with newer organizations so that you'll you know, co-present on things and they can help you cultivate your ideas. Now, when we say presentations, they're not formal or high stress. It's really sharing on what you're learning. So, you know, that's just a word about that. I won't go into detail about that now. When we look at, so what are the outcomes of the learning community? We do notice that organizations tend to have measurable changes in a few key areas. One is examining their organization's progress over time, right? How are we doing now? All right, and this helps, you know, looking at this might be instructive to helping you. Was that a question? Okay, helping you think through how your organization might actually apply this. So if you're wondering, well, how are we doing with our job training this year versus last year, or this session versus last session? How are we doing in tracking your work over time? And that is one key way that organizations improve their capacity. Another is comparing themselves with others. As you can see from the life needs assessment, it opens up a whole new world of looking to see if your clients are doing better after you implement some sort of, say, housing program versus other clients in the rest of the community who were not able to participate in that. It helps to rule out the other factors such as, well, maybe everybody's doing better with housing because of a new federal program or because the economy improved. And so that helps, but it helps you to compare yourself with others also for coordinating reasons. And third is data to decision making. The ability to, for instance, say, well, you know, we have the frontline staff who work in this program have come up with some great ideas that they'd like to try out. This time, let's run one session with one idea and another with another and see which one worked out better. And then after that, we'll know which one to adopt across all of our sessions, right? So that type of data-driven decision-making. So we see organizations improve their organizational capacity, and this is their own ratings. But we also see people improve their skills. Using Excel, right? We mentioned a lot of people use Excel maybe for budgeting or other purposes, but have never used it for evaluation. Creating logic models is a key tool and approach. And using pivot tables, which is really how you analyze data that you indicate you're going to analyze in your logic model. And using tools like Microsoft Access. Depending on time, we'll either, and how the learning community is progressing, we'll either include our Microsoft Access function or not. It's basically a tutorial on how to build a database. It helps you become a more informed consumer and client or consumer and user of databases. So really those give you a sense. If you're thinking of your own projects, right, they should build capacity to demonstrate both outcomes, right? We're really going to focus on outputs and outcomes. So both of those, not just outputs. And you really want to support a program or group of programs that address an identifiable community need. As I mentioned, this becomes easier once you do the life needs assessment. So you may already know that there's a program you want to focus on. And if so, that helps. Share that in your due diligence meeting. But you may also just be looking to survey the needs of your clients and address those using life needs assessment, and that is fine as well. You can collaborate with multiple organizations. We've had multiple organizations collaborating on, say, a joint grant that they want to do this with. You can hire work with consultants or external evaluators, but the key thing here is we want to build the capacity of the organization. So if the consultant is going to do all the work, and then when the consultant is gone, your organization isn't any more sophisticated in this area, that's not quite a fit, right? They could maybe help you with some aspects of the project, but we really want to see evidence that your organization is going to become more sophisticated after this. We're all starting in our own places and we're all on our own journeys, and that's completely fine. We just want to help you take that next step to becoming more sophisticated in this area and being able to address more of your organizational needs. And certainly if it involves creating a new process for data collection, that would be a great example. The life needs assessment, as we mentioned, does provide you with that. Some organizations have decided to incorporate the life needs assessment right into their databases. One, for instance, example that has worked well is they simply put a link on their database to the life needs assessment. So when they're doing intake, they click on it and they also fill that out. Others have incorporated the life needs assessment questions into their databases. And others have simply picked and choose, but you don't need to use it forever. It's only if it helps your organization. But by the time you're done, I think a lot of organizations are seeing that it's very, very helpful to participating in it for future needs and future grants. So those are some examples. Evaluation helps you to plan better, improve implementation, tweak things to make sure your programming goes better, demonstrate your impact to funders, which of course goes back to the origins of this. We wanted to be able to show the federal government and pull in that money to help expand programs with proven impact. You really need to demonstrate that impact to do that. It also sets you up well for if you want to hire an external evaluator. You really only want to do that if you're pretty sure your program works, right? Or else you're kind of throwing money away. But having an external evaluator could help to prove to third-party audiences that this is an excellent approach and is worthy of funding and is worthy of scaling up. That's how our industry evolves and gets better and better. So we do want that type of activity as well, and helps you strategically allocate resources as well. So those are all really important things. We do want to urge you, as using Peter York's great quote, typically nonprofits will say, we have a goal like we want to end homelessness or eliminate a disease. But you often want to think in terms of shorter term goals as well, because these goals can be notoriously inspirational, but very, very hard to measure and beyond the scope of a single intervention or program. So it's more realistic to measure whether clients in a program, for instance, help the homeless actually follow through with job referrals, get over that hump, or doctor's appointments. And such goals may sound less inspiring, but actually represent a significant achievement. More importantly, they are within reach, and they are the building blocks for achieving broader societal change one person at a time. So typically outputs are easy to measure and outcomes are hard. The life needs assessment really strives to make easily measurable outcomes. If something on that changes, that is a change in a person's life, whether knowledge or situation. So be realistic is key. So we have a bunch of examples, but for the sake of time, I'll simply say that some of these organizations, for instance, are looking to measure needs and track performance over time, create dashboards that are real time. Those are types of things that we can help you move toward. And certainly the life needs assessment actually does that with the 19 indicators. But you may also seek to do that with other indicators that are unique to your organization. But moving toward real-time tracking is a key thing that many organizations will want to do, and that this will help me move toward. But also looking the old-fashioned but very much still critical evaluation questions. Do people do better after my program versus before? And here's an example of looking at a measure pre versus post, pre versus post, pre versus post, and looking for learning goals in this example. As you see, the life needs assessment also gives you the capability to do that with the 19 questions. You may want to do it with things that are specific to your organization as well. Going to really jump to, how do you apply? There is the link. It is on the Central New York Community Foundation's website. And if you click on that link, you will see that it walks you through the steps. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment just so it lets me click on that link. And so I can actually go there and just make sure that when you see the application, there are no surprises. And so I'll go ahead, grab that link real quickly and go there so that, okay, and I'll now share the screen again. So basically, this is a link to the Central New York Community Foundation's website. You can see the PMLC logo. Can you see that? Great, thank you. And so you can see right here that the deadline is coming up July 10th. The application is here. So when you click on that application, you'll be brought to a form. It has this as a reminder, which we already walked through. You can indicate which one you think is the best fit, but if you're not sure, you can leave it blank. And we also will be talking with you, of course. And you can go through and fill out this. It points out what the life needs assessment questions are. It asks you to rate yourself. Remember, I pointed out these dimensions at which we tend to see growth, comparing yourselves over time, comparing yourselves to others, and then incorporating data into decision making. It asks you to pick where you are now, and you'll be for each of those three. And then, of course, you can imagine we'll help you. You'll choose where you are at the end. And then you have a few other questions and submit. So it's not a long application, but we wanted to make sure that you saw it and that there were no surprises there. So I'm going to return back to our slides and begin projecting there again. And I think we're getting to the point where it's, I'll turn it back over to you, Shawn, for questions and comment period.
Thank you for that, Frank. I'm pretty sure you need a break after that long one. I commend you on that. So do we have any questions from anyone at this time? All right. Just so you know, you can either just voice your question right now. There is in the bottom right-hand side of the reaction. You can just click that and hit the thumbs up if you have a question as well. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. So I see here, Director. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. You have a question? You're muted at this time. Should I unmute them?
If you can. I also see another question from iPhone.
Okay, we'll come back to it. I see iPhone had a question. I'm sorry, I don't know your name either.
That's okay. My name is Trina.
Trina.
Had to for the get back, but so I'm excited about the class and everything that it entails and the assistance that it offers emerging businesses and pre-existing companies. When is the scheduled start date?
Great question. For the PMLC intermediate, it will start the first Friday of January, but there'll probably be a orientation session just to get you up and running and ready in December of 2020. So that's for the intermediate group. The Shawn, do we have a timeline yet for the prep or pro? They're usually scheduled to start after December.
Yes. So the I'm sure I'm not muted. The prep course is tentative date is going to be in February, and then our pro class will be looking to start in April. So it is staggered a little bit where the intermediate starts first, but so like Frank said, intermediate will be January, prep will be February, pro will be most likely in April.
Okay.
So
And I just need a little clarification now. I know before they were all physical. Has it all been transferred to virtual?
Yes, at this time they are. They have been transferred to virtual. Hopefully something can change where we could go back to in person, but there will be a virtual platform for these classes going forward.
Excellent. That's great.
I really hope we get back to in person because it's more fun and the sandwiches and the meals are delicious. So yeah, if there is a group that's eager to start collecting data right now, we realize we're in the midst of COVID, and some organizations have reached out to us and said, we really want a pulse of our clients. We want to know what their needs are now. We absolutely can, and we have set up a life needs assessment for your organization. The thing that we do in the prep group is really walk you through all the ways you can use it. So it's sort of like the difference between giving you like a Swiss Army knife and then you just using it on your own versus going through all the tools and all the different ways it can be used. So I just wanted to make that clear, just in case there are groups, because we have had a very rapid increase in people using the life needs assessment, both in learning communities and not, because it's a helpful way to track needs of clients during COVID. And we realize that, there are immediate food needs. There are other things that aren't needs at the moment that are also in the life needs assessment, like housing, transportation, childcare. All these things will likely become more immediate needs as the economy opens up more and more people go back to work, and especially for most vulnerable populations. So, that we realize that that's very helpful for applying for grants and letting funders know that you need funding for emerging needs and talking to donors, and it's real time and it's very easy to administer. So we do want to let you know that if that's something that is helpful to you, you don't have to wait for this application process. If you were to do that, it would just simply make your life easier. If you then became part of one of these learning communities, it would just make your life easier once you got there because you'd already have data. But we realize people's needs are changing by the day, and so we've launched monthly reports that are automated for those groups too, so you can see month to month how the needs are changing among your clients.
All righty. Do we have anyone else? Deborah, go ahead. Deborah, you're muted right now.
Could you please share your outline?
The outline from the PowerPoint? Okay, let's see here. Was that this one? Can you see that?
Yes, yes. Can you email it? I just need to have a reference for the buy-in. from my, for my board. Thanks.
Yes. Do you have, Shawn, do you have a list of the emails? You do have the emails of everyone who signed up?
Yep, I'll be sure to send this out to everyone.
And you can see that this is the one for the intermediate, and you can see why the grants are higher, because it's considerable work, and it really, really does transform the skills of that person. It really enhances the skills, the marketable skills, and the personal evaluation skills of the people who participate. So it's a lot more investing in the person versus the prep really starts with just investing in the organization. Anyone can kind of use the life needs assessment without training. I see Mike LaFleur.
Good morning, Frank. I just had a question. I know somebody just asked about getting a copy of the schedule sheet, but is it possible just to get a copy of the presentation itself? Because I know there's some good detail on there.
Yeah, so we're actually recording this. We can email the PowerPoint to you, and as far as the video, when will that be available?
Depends on how close I get the editing down. So probably pretty soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll email the PowerPoint to everyone. All right. Do we have any other questions?
While we're thinking, I would like to ask, are there things that you thought you would see that you did not see? As I mentioned, this is ever evolving, and the components of this came from different organizations talking about their frustrations over the years. Is there anything here that you thought you would see or that you were hoping to see that you didn't?
Frank, I've got I don't know if it's more of a question or a comment, but it's not really not seen. But obviously with Housing Visions, we have a lot of housing, and we've got a big portfolio in Syracuse. And I'm discovering through our property management, we've got our data is through Boston Post. So we've got a plethora of data that I'm jumping into and hoping to work with some other agencies that actually do the social services end to kind of see how we can better serve our residents. So that's kind of my thought is how do I use my current data to kind of find out what the issues are and how to get people into a better place, and then also how do we measure that success to see if we are actually moving the needle for our residents.
Thank you for sharing that, Mike. That's a perfect fit for the PMLC intermediate group. That's all about using your own data, downloading data from your organizational data system into Excel, crunching it, even using statistical software if that is where you want to go. We certainly practice with the life needs assessment, but where that middle group departs from the prep group is you actually download the raw data sheets and get practice using it that way. But the expectation and hope is that you'll use this to really dig into data that you're already collecting and to use that more efficiently. The life needs assessment was created largely because many organizations just didn't have any data infrastructure, and so to jumpstart those. But groups like yours, some of them have decided to just incorporate those as questions and to coordinate rather than to start something separate.
Okay. Yeah. No, I've been slowly digging into it, and we've just got so much information, and really, hopeful to work with Catholic Charities or Peace or whomever that really can provide that safety net end that we don't do, but we've got that data just sitting there that I'd love to utilize.
Yeah, that's right along the theme of the coordination and collaboration, and that sounds like a great fit.
Yeah.
Deborah, go ahead.
You're mute.
Frank, you asked the question, was there something that wasn't a part of the presentation? Because I'm new, because I'm new, I was looking for a testimonial, kind of like, from a perspective of someone whose organization is thriving and how that collaboration really looks in real time? I'm just.
Yeah, there should be some online. I know they've certainly interviewed groups and done it, and one group made a video. I'm going to see if it's on the website. That's a great. I know we have them, but that's a. Shawn, maybe we could send around one or two of those articles.
Will do. Absolutely.
I'm trying to think. Most recently, I remember Peace Incorporated was featured in some news stories, and Northside Learning Center most recently. I know WCNY produced a video with some. I have to find that though. But that's a great help. That's helpful. Thank you. And of course, the groups that we gave two examples of said that we could share their data because they found it useful. So that's two others you can look at. And that was yeah.
Do we have any other questions? All righty. I think at this time, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I appreciate everyone attending today. I hope you learned a lot of information, and I hope you're excited as we are for the program. Kira, do you have anything?
Does Colleen have a question?
Yeah, I just had a question. If we have questions, if we're doing the application, can we reach out if there's something else that comes up and we haven't thought of?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can contact me directly and I can answer any question you have.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All righty. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. If you have any other questions, like I said before, please reach out to me directly. I'll be glad to help you. I know we're all excited. I hope you guys are excited as well. Frank, do you have anything else?
Just to say that the nature of the learning community is fun and playful. And so people tend to wear denim and be relaxed and kind of, it's about having fun and playing with data. And the whole purpose is to, you know, do better for your organization. There's no grades or anything like that.
All right.
And it's confidential. We didn't say that. It's like what happens in the learning community stays in the learning community. So as you share things like, oh, we don't have a data system, we use Post-it notes, that kind of thing. We don't share that with others. And you have to give permission before it gets featured you know, here. We also ask permission typically before we feature your work with our board, that kind of thing. So it's a safe space to learn.
All right. So, and once again, if you haven't applied already, the deadline for your application is Friday, July 10th, and you can apply right on the website. This information session will be available to be watched again soon, and I will forward all information that you requested as far as testimonial, the PowerPoint, and the schedule of the course. And if there's anything else you need, please let me know. Other than that, thank you for attending.
iPhone. Sorry, Trina, is that right? Trina has a question.
Yes, I do. So now how many participants from each organization there has to be a minimum amount of participants in order for an organization to apply, correct?
No. So we encourage that you have at least 3 to 4 participants in the course. And that's just due to turnover, personal issues that might be going on, and comprehending the information. If your organization cannot supply that, definitely inform us and we can make some adjustments for you.
Okay, because I had another, it was a two-part question. The second part was, what about, you know, maybe two organizations coming together to participate in the course, and two people, just, you know, maybe two people from each organization. I wanted to, would that be something that would be acceptable?
I would say yes. We actually have a similar situation like that in our prep course right now. So yes, you are able to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All righty, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you all.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye.